Okay, I think open it up. So I did it a bit like a hypochondriac, but because there are some issues with or questions about how line weights should be applied, and I basically tried to make sense of it. So here I tried to highlight what line weights I used and how it looks, how the drawing looks overall graphically, right? So you get something like this. And the main logic with applying line weights to these isometric drawings was to trace the outer line of a geometry, and from that go inside and thin out the line weights, right? So in this case, if I'm highlighting this louver, I'm going around the outer border of the louver with a thick line, which is 2 points, and then everything else, like the secondary ones, become lighter. So it was 1. I'm doing the same thing for single surfaces. So in this case, if I want to highlight this overall consoling volume, I'm tracing the outline of it with 2. So this is all 2. And then the inner lines have to be thinner than that, right? So I'm getting in with 1. And then the further in I go, the further thinner it gets. So in this case, these lines become the third hierarchy, so they become 0.5. I kind of follow this logic while I was doing the staircase as well, because the lines in the staircases are close to each other. So in that case, you want to make them as thin as possible. And I deleted a lot of my geometries here to show the connected surfaces or continuous surfaces. So in this case, when I exported the solid model, I had drafting lines here and here as well. So this staircase gave me more lines than it should. And I basically, in Illustrator, went with like selecting them individually and deleting them. The other option you could do is using the scissor tool. So I will go over it again. My lines are locked, so I'm going to unlock them. So the way scissor tool works is basically you can split any type of line geometry where there's an intersection, right? So let's say I want to split this line. This file is pretty much done, but I'm just going to show you how scissor works again. So basically I want to, let's say, split this line so that after this intersection I can apply a different line weight. This has to be segmented. So I switch to the scissor tool, C is the shortcut, and click on this intersection when the line is selected. And what it does is it adds another anchor point and splits this line into 2 sections, right? So I get this part and this part separated. So now this part I can give a different stroke value, and the stroke value is all the way on top, so I can make it 1 if I wanted to, right? So this is kind of the logic I made. Every line I used, they're consistent and continuous, so that's why my at the end of the day, my stroke options, I stick to the round cap, because if you switch to butt cap when the lines are consistent, you will get corners. So let me show you here. So if these were to be butt capped, there will be a disconnection here, right? So what you want to do is make them overlap a bit. So I just used everything as round cap, so I didn't even change that. Let's say you're unable to use the scissor tool. In this case, you cannot, let's say, draw over here, right? Sometimes I think Rebecca's drawing didn't have it as well, so she wasn't able to split a geometry. I would just recommend you to use the line segment tool to just draft lines to connect or complete the geometry. So for instance, let's say this doesn't split, so I can delete the geometry, and I want to have 2 line segments here. So I could go to the line segment tool, grab onto this corner, let me see, click and hold and drag. Click and hold and drag to draft, click and hold and find where it like locks. So now I need to extend this guy, so I can do it diagonally, kind of like where it intersects. So I could also draft individual lines this way. Okay, so the line tool works with again, clicking, holding onto the click, and then leaving the click where you want to draw the line from. So click, hold, and drop. So I can also draft individual line segments this way. Okay? I think this is supposed to be like this because this is a continuous surface. I forgot to delete this portion. I think this is supposed to be a bridge. So I think this is correct. So now I can even fix this drawing a little bit too. So these guys are going to be 2. So this reads like a continuous surface. Okay? And that was the kind of logic behind this drawing. I also outlined the site with 2 and left the other buildings on the site with 1 so that your model kind of stands out as line drawing. Okay? So I want to add some fills to my design, and this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to first isolate the graphic lines I have. So to do that, I'm going to first take out my text and arrows so that I have a clean line drawing. And then what you want to do is grab everything. Okay? Grab everything. Grab every line you have, just lines. In all files, just grab all the lines you have, and then use the Alt key, make a copy it to the right side. Okay? So this is what we are going to do. We are going to use or maintain these lines that we have arranged, the line weights. But here I'm going to create a live paint group, and I'm going to be able to grab individual surfaces or fills. Alright? So I'm going to choose this portion that I just copied, and then I'm going to come to Shape Builder tool, click and hold, and then switch to Live Paint Bucket. So when you go over this copy now, you will see a message. It says click to make a live paint group, and that's what you want to do. When you click, if you get this message, just click OK. This will be turned into a single line weight, and it will be grouped. And now if you see this red highlights, those are basically the areas I could add a fill. You want me to do the step again? Yes. Sure, no problem. So I grabbed everything I had, hold the Alt key, you see this double arrow, and I made a copy, right? After I made the copy, I selected all the geometry I have. Even though they're in different layers, this doesn't matter. They will be grouped under Live Paint Bucket. Then I go to the Shape Builder tool, and under Shape Builder tool, we have Live Paint Bucket. The shortcut is K on your keyboard. And then I click on this group to make it into a Live Paint Bucket. If you get this message, it's okay. Just say OK. Now, this will be grouped, and then you'll be able to grab onto individual areas, individual surfaces. Right? So what I want to do now is double click on the fill and choose gray. Let's say we want to do 120, 120, 120. That's what I'm going to start with. Hit OK. Now, any area I'm going to click, and I want to take out the stroke, so I double click to the fill here. You could also do it here on top. Double clicked here and chose an RGB value. Doesn't matter for now, just grab anything. You can even do red if you want. Double click to the fill on the toolbar. Double click to the fill to create a fill there, just gray. And then the stroke, double click on the stroke, or just activate the stroke and then choose none. Let me see. If that doesn't work, come up here and then choose none. Okay, come up here to the stroke and choose none. Now what that means is wherever I'm clicking, I'll be adding a solid fill and no line weights. Okay, so if I click here, there will be a gray fill there. If I click here, there will be a gray fill, but I'm not able to see them, so I'm going to change my fill color to be red so you guys could see it. So I'm basically adding a fill. okay, in Illustrator. So I'm going to add these two as my backdrop. So I'm going to be able to give them a different shade afterwards. I also want to add a fill here to this, because this is also cut, right? I want to make this black because this is part of the lens. I'm going to make this black as well, so I grabbed onto that too. Okay. The other thing I want to do is I want to add a fill to the ground. Okay, where's the ground on my design? This is ground, this is ground, this is ground, this is ground, and this is ground. I think this is all the ground surface I have on my design. Okay? Let's wait there for a bit. Now, come down here to the layers after you add those fills. Create a new layer. Call it Live Paint. And move this stuff over there. So now, that's basically the only thing you have in that layer. This thing. Huh? It's basically just selected, and then I'll just undo the steps. So whatever layer you created it on, that's where it was. So you see this highlighted square? Create a new layer, rename it. New layer is here. Create new layer, rename it, and then click here to the square to move objects from this to that layer. Huh? Live Paint already groups them. Live Paint groups them already. What do you mean you don't have the option? If you're missing an overall rectangle here, I have a square in this file. If you're missing that, and if you try to do a Live Paint with these lines, okay, you guys see this? I'm missing the outline. So I won't be able to grab onto these areas because there won't be any geometry that defines that surface, right? So in order to have that, I could just grab onto a rectangle and just draw a rectangle here over this artboard. Okay? And then grab onto all of this and bring it with the rectangle. Now if you click on to Live Paint, you'll be able to grab onto these areas because they're defined. Alright? If you have done this step already, created these surfaces, put them onto a different layer called Live Paint. Now we want to isolate, we want to extract the fills that we have just created. Okay, but before I do that, what I'm going to do is move this back onto my canvas so that I can work with it. So I'm going to move this back and overlap it with my line drawing so I get something like this. Okay? So now, so what I'm going to do next is I overlapped it with my existing line drawing, so, and my Live Paint is on another layer, so I have these fills overlapping with my lines. So I'm going to choose my Live Paint, follow these steps, go to Object, Expand, Object Expand. You want to expand the fill. You want to expand the fills. Okay? So I hit OK. Now I'm going to hide all the other layers in Illustrator so that I only isolate my Live Paint. Now I expanded my Live Paint bucket. When see, do it again. Object, expand, fill. Do we have to do objects as well? Let me see, objects. Sorry, do the objects. Object, expand. You want to expand, have everything selected. Have object, fill, stroke, all of them selected. Just expand everything. Once you do that, when you select your light paint bucket, right click, you want to do ungroup. Expand basically, since it's a light paint bucket group, everything is, like when you select something, it selects everything. When we do expand, we are separating them. We are basically separating the fills we added within the regions from the strokes around them. Okay? So you want to do ungroup for a few times until you can grab onto these individual fills. So I grabbed it to the whole thing and right-clicked, did ungroup. Now I can grab onto these fills. Okay? So now what I want to do is grab onto these ground fills and make them black. And I want to grab onto these background fills and make them gray. So I'm going to make them start with 80, 80, 80. Let's see how that looks. Let's make it a bit lighter. 120. Okay, so I selected the background fills to be 120 gray and the ground fills to be 0. Okay, I'll do the steps again. So here's my light paint bucket group. I went to object, expand, and have all these objects selected. Objects, fills, strokes, and you want to expand everything. After you expand it, you will see that the light paint group is disabled. And all you have to do is now to ungroup these objects. So then you select onto the group, right click, and do ungroup a bunch of times until you can grab onto these individual fills. And when you can select them, give the background, I did 120, 120, 120, the gray. If you have the palette here, you could also grab those fills from there directly. And this one I made black. Okay? Yeah. I'm assuming. Step is done. The next thing I want to do is I created these custom fill patterns in the file I sent you guys. So let me show them again. It's not here. This one doesn't have as well. I think I had mine already applied. But was it on T-square? Was it on the resources? ISO. I downloaded mine, I think. Let me just go over it here. I have the file. Where is it? Okay, so we started with something like this, right? All simple lines. We added the line weights. Now what we're doing is getting it to become something more like a tactile drawing. So I added this fill for the ground where basically we're cutting the ground, so I'm leaving it as a black pochette, right? Even though it's an axonometric view, that's fine. And I'm adding a backdrop. Now the fill I chose on this file is a bit blending too much with the fills here, so I would like you to select a bit lighter. You can even leave it as white if you want it. Okay? Don't be afraid to use white. White is actually a really balancing element in these graphic drawings. Like the more white you use, the more balanced things look. When you have too much color going on, things start getting too dark and unbalanced. Now the other thing I applied is the shadow, the silhouettes, and these textures. That's all I'm missing basically, right? So the ground I already applied as a fill. So what I want to do now is replace that fill. Rather than using a solid color, maybe I want to use a pattern, right? So I'll show you how you can create custom patterns, but I want you to use only these two that I'm going to share with you. So the patterns I'm going to use are located in the reference file I sent you. If you created a different file, just go to your swatches. So go to Window, Swatches, and then come in here to this Dropbox here, drop-down menu here. So just open Windows, Swatches, click here to drop down, and choose Other Library, and find the file I sent to you, and open that file. I think it was ISO. Just open an Illustrator file, and what it's going to do is it's going to create these two new pattern styles under your swatches. Yeah. The one in the email, the one in the announcement, ISO guidelines. Download the ISO AI file. The swatches are in there. Okay, and what I'm doing is basically how to create a diagonal stripe pattern in Illustrator. There's a tutorial online, and it shows you how to do this. I'm not going to go over it because we'll waste time, and I just wanted to share those with you. But you could basically do fill patterns that are more customized and more graphic as well. So in this case, we are starting with just a single line, and then we are using a new command called blend command to make an array of these lines. And then once you create an array of parallel lines, you can just draw a backdrop rectangle and then drop it into your swatches. So you apply it, you basically store it as a fill pattern, right? So whatever shape you choose, or whatever fill outline you have, you can just choose that as your fill property, and it will apply the diagonal lines to it. And using this, you can create multiple things. You can do colored lines, you could do different line weights, but of course the trick is consistency, right? So you want this to be expandable and repeatable in both directions. So that kind of takes a bit of knowledge, but if you keep an odd number of copies along the path you're making and consistent line weights, the pattern always blends. So you could create patterns like this basically. So I already gave them in the swatches. Did everybody get these new two swatches? So go to Window, Swatches, Window, Swatches, turn on this Swatches tab. If you're working on another file, we're going to bring the swatches in the file that I'm providing to you. That's what we're doing. Did you download the ISO file from the announcement? Okay. Then go to Windows, Swatches, click here, and then Other Library, and open up the file I gave you, ISO file. When you open that, you're going to have these two new swatches available to you. Now I want you to see what they do. So create two rectangle patches. Okay? Choose the top one. And when your fill property is in front, here under toolbar, click on the first swatch. See what it does. This one does a diagonal line pattern. And the other one does this kind of plus, kind of grass type of fill. So it's kind of custom fills basically. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is grab onto my ground fills on my site. Grab onto all of them. And then select the second swatch, the plus swatch. If you want to copy the properties, you can use eyedropper. Huh? I'm going to grab onto these fills. And I'm going to use the eyedropper tool and grab the property of this fill here. So my site is basically applied with the same fill pattern. Yeah? You have a question? Oh, yeah. Good question. So to control the size of the fill, you can select one of the fills and go to Object, Transform, Scale, and here you want to choose Transform Patterns, not Transform Objects, because scale, you can also scale the shape, right? So you just want to do Transform Patterns and uncheck Transform Objects, and then if you hit 50% and do Preview, it will be denser, right? So you want to choose a pattern that is not too dense though. If you want to reduce it less to 80%, then I can grab onto my other fills and use the eyedropper to copy the properties from that. So it will be the same. Eyedropper tool again. So I'm kind of changing the density and scale of my fill. Okay? So that's that step. The other step is, let's work on the shadows. Let's bring the shadows as an image to lay behind our drawing. I'm going to go back to Rhino. Find your viewport. Find your isometric view. Mine was this view. So what we are going to do is something similar to the exercise we did before, but this time we're going to use a custom light source. Okay? Do you want me to wait for a bit? Okay. Just please say. Well, the previous time we did these sets, we used the default light setting. Now this time we're going to make a conscious light arrangement for our isometric drawings. And what I want you to do is to think of an angle where you want to cast the shadows from that complements your design the best, right? So in this case, we don't want to get too many large shadows. We just want to add it as another element to add depth. So the file I actually used for this example, I forgot to embed it, so it's missing, so I have to do this as well. Now switch to Rhino render, and when you hit render, you should get a default shadow. Now, what we want to do is to place a custom light source in our Rhino file so that we could use it to control the sun direction and the shadows as well. So I'm going to go to top view. The drawing I'm making is in this view. So basically I'm going to draw a triangle. The drawing I'm making is looking at it from this view. Okay? This is the direction I'm looking at my model, and maybe we want to cast the shadows in this view so that the shadows would go a bit against my view and also like add a little bit of drop. If I cast the shadows in this direction, I may not see the shadows as well because it's going to overlap with the view angle I'm looking at the model. Does that make sense to everyone? Huh? So I'm looking from the top diagonal to my model, right? If I want to see shadows, I need another angle to cast shadows from. I cannot place the light source here and cast it from my same view angle because it's not going to give me enough shadows to see. So what I'm going to do, go to render tools. We're going to create a simple light. Huh? Render tools. We're going to create a directional light. Just a directional light. You can also type in directional light in your command. And that's basically it. It's directional light. And what I want to do is enter these coordinates. So we want to create a perfectly diagonal line, and we're going to rotate it slightly to play around with the angle. So the end of light direction vector is basically the target of the light source. So we want to specify it as the origin, 0, 0, 0. Look at the command line, end of the light direction. Huh? No, you don't have to. I'm just placing, directional light is basically infinitely parallel. So I'm just setting it up at an angle specified. End of direction line vector 0, 0, 0, enter. Start of line direction vector, enter 50, 50, 50. So it basically gives it, I mean you can enter 1, 1, 1 as well. That's perfectly fine. So it gives it a diagonal. Doesn't matter. I'm just defining a vector right now. 50, 50, 50, enter. So basically, this is my light source. You will only be able to see it in wireframe mode. You won't be able to see it in any other view. Okay? So this is where my light is going to be cast now. Huh? Because I wanted you to create it at a diagonal angle. You see? It's tilted. In elevation as well. Huh?
Your command was
Directional light. It's the third one in the light options. It's this guy. Create directional light. 0, 0, 0 and 50, 50, 50. No, I didn't select anything. I'm just placing this light object. And then the next thing is, since I'm looking at my model in this view, look at where the triangle is. I want to orient my sun position in such a way that it's going to cast shadows with respect to my view. So in the top view, I'm going to hit rotate, type rotate, and I want to rotate this around my model. It actually doesn't depend on it being placed on the model or away from the model, because this is infinite, like it's being projected from an infinite location. So even if this light source overlaps with your model, it will still do the job. Okay, it's just a reference for direction. It's basically a vector. So I'm going to draw a rotation circle, and then I want to rotate this around my model. So let's go somewhere maybe here. So let's test this corner, this angle. Okay. So that's the direction. This is where my light source is. You could also place light sources manually, but this is what will happen. I could have basically clicked on my model as my target and then draw it anywhere, but this will be placed on the coordinate system, and then you will have to tilt it up. So that's why I entered the numeric values, to give it a 45-degree angle with the ground. Render tools, lights. You will only see it in wireframe mode. Go to wireframe. You will only see it in wireframe. You won't see the light source in rendered view. You will see its shadows in rendered view. Okay? So I'm going to switch back to ISO. My light source is here. This is my model. And I'm going to hit render to see how those shadows are cast. So now I'm getting shadows using that light source, right? So let's see what kind of shadows we're getting. This is actually not bad. But if you're getting a lot of depth, like let's say this building is casting too much shadow here. Does everybody see that? Huh? This area is too dark, because this building is casting too much shadow. So what I want to do is tilt my sun a little bit more as well. So I'm going to go to the front view to do that, and I'm going to do rotation here. So I'm going to rotate my sun. I'm going to rotate the azimuth basically. So I'm going to rotate it a bit like this. I tried to fix it on mine. Somehow, yeah, it's like a hardware issue. It didn't fix you'll be able to simultaneously see the rendered view if your display settings are working. Mine doesn't show it for some reason. But you could also, do a bit trial and error, right? So you could do like tilt the angle. So now I'm kind of getting better shadows. This guy is casting a little bit in this direction. Well, I'm getting maybe a bit too much on this side. So what I want to do is tilt it a bit towards the building more. So I'm going to rotate in top view this time. So all you have to do is have a top view and an elevation view to do these rotations to your sun. And then you can do the rotation with respect to your model. And then do these test renders before you bump up the resolution. So this is kind of the rendering I used, right? So it's kind of a nice diagonal angle you want to find to cast the shadows from. Now when we are happy with this configuration, what I want you to do is take off the I actually forgot to I added a material here, but select the site ground and change its color to be white in material properties. So I'll do that again. Select the surface. Select this bottom surface, which is shaded with pink. When that's selected, go to Properties tab and select Material and change the color to be white. So you get something like that. And then you're ready to render your shadows, basically. So what you would do is the same thing we did. So go to your render options, bump up your resolution to like, let's do it a bit larger. Let's do 8000 by 8000. And I'm going to do the DPI at 150 and transparent background. And hit render. Rendering, make sure that you see the whole site. So right now I'm missing this portion. So when I try to bring in Illustrator, we're going to crop the image. So you want to make sure that you're rendering the whole thing first. Right, so I'm going to basically pan around a bit, maybe zoom out a bit. I also want to hide this building. I don't want to render it. So I'm going to render this again. So that the image you get shows the whole site. Okay. And it's not too small. guys get the image? So this is mine. What I'm going to do is save as PNG again. So I choose PNG and call a shadow. When we are saving it as a PNG, the background that is black is not going to be black because the PNG doesn't store transparency information, right? It stores transparency information. So now I'm going to open Illustrator. Huh? You don't need alpha. Just save the shadows as PNG. Is not what? Zoom out a bit with the camera. I'm going to click on New Layer and call it the Shadows. I already have one here, Shadows. I'm going to create a new one though. Call it Shadows. And drop this image to the canvas, to Illustrator. So now I have this drawing to overlap with my this rendering to overlap with my drawing. Okay, so I'm going to grab it, and first thing I'm going to do is put it under the shadow layer, so it goes all the way behind the line drawings. And then the next thing I'm going to do is do a little bit of scaling. So I'm going to move it around, and I'm going to scale my drawing using Shift and try to find the right scale for your drawing, basically. So this step could be a bit tedious. It takes sometimes time, but like make sure that you kind of have multiple lines to match. So basically, you want to lock everything else that you're using as reference so that you don't move them around. And you can also add transparency to this object. So this image that I brought in, I could just make it a bit transparent. This is already something we are going to do anyway. So right now, I'm trying to match this wall, and when I see the overall wall, my image is still large, so I could still go about scaling it down. And then use the keyboard keys to move it around. You could do that if you want, if you know how you cropped the view. I would do this in Illustrator, to be honest. It shouldn't take very long. Look, I already did mine with a couple of scaling, so I'm partially matching this outline, partially matching this wall, but there's a little bit of mismatch here, right? So I need to scale it just a bit more. And if you're like at this level, what you could do is go to Add Object, Transform Scale, turn on Preview, make it 100%, and then select Uniform and use the roller to like do it as minimal as possible, right? So like 99, and then use the keyboard. Like I finally matched it with the draw. I mean, you will do these things a lot during the course of the program. Yeah. You're asking me the other angle for the shadows? Yeah, for another drawing? I'll check. I'll look at your drawing in a bit. Okay, so once. Huh? No, I applied some transparency. My image is 50% transparent. So. Whole square of gray. Did you save it as a PNG file format? Then did you choose transparent background when you rendered? Okay. So here's the thing. My rendering is overflowing the canvas. Does everybody see that? Right? The image is larger than the canvas. So what I'm going to do is crop it. I'm going to draw another rectangle along the artboard. And then I'm going to select the image and the rectangle at the same time. And right click to the canvas and do make clipping mask. So what this will do is it will get rid of everything that is overflowing the image. Now my shadow image basically is placed behind my canvas. And all I have to do is bring back my background fills, bring back my textures, my line weights, and that's basically, that should be it. The image? Clipping mask, sure. So I brought the image. I found the right scale. Did you drop it to the canvas? I placed the image. I found the right scale. How do I make sure my image is in the right scale? You want to bring in some of the guiding geometry and make sure all the edges overlap, right? And you could basically use the computer dodge keys and make sure that when you're like, each dodge is 1 pixel. So when I'm dodging it up, right now it's off. When I dodge it down, it overlaps perfectly fine with the lines. And when I do right, it's off. When I do left, it overlaps. So that's kind of how I'm micromanaging the scale overlap with the line drawing. And after you place it, I want you to start with 50% transparency, opacity for this image, the shadows. I think 50% works well. And it should be all the way at the bottom in layer order. So this is the drawing in the back. And everything else should be added on top of it. So all the other lines should be brought up on top. And I actually did the clipping mask as well. I did the clipping mask. Yeah, I did the clipping mask. It's basically my image is overflowing my canvas. So what I did was I drew another rectangle, a square, to the artboard, and then I chose the image and the square together, and right click and choose make clipping mask, and that basically trims the image using the rectangle. And that's basically it. The rest is adding human figures, adding more maybe texture fills. Make sure your background fill is different or lighter than your actual shades. So in this case, mine are a bit darker, so I'm going to make them a bit lighter. Actually, let's leave them white. Okay? Let's leave them white. The background is white. White fill. It looks best when it's white. Okay? Gray tint? Yes. The gray tint. Yes. This is all we are doing. It's basically doing shading for us, right? So we want to keep those. I gave this as well because I wanted you to do something with it, but I think it was too much. But again, if you want to do it, you're more than welcome. It's already in the other swatch. It's this guy, the diagonal fill. And basically, we are building something with layers, right? So I could just grab all my line weights, make another copy of it, and then it's the same process. I'll just another live paint bucket, and then come down here, add black fills to all the walkable surfaces. I could just add, you don't have to do the stairs, you will just do the landings. So this surface, is a walkable surface. The top surfaces of the landings, these corridors, these areas, and this is a walkable surface. So that's basically it for this project that I have. So this is the only visible walkable surface in this drawing. And then what I would do is the same steps. Object, expand, ungroup, ungroup. And you want to move these to another layer. So in this case, I have them at level 14. And I could just select one. And if you want to select all the fills you just added, go to select, same, appearance. You will just get all the fills you just added. And you want to apply the second swatch, which is this guy, the diagonal lines, and you get something like this. Now what you need to do is align it to the geometry that you have. So you go to Object, Transform, Rotate, and you want to rotate the patterns, not the objects. And you want to do it by using the mouse scroll. So you could just like tilt the angle, and the pattern will be rotated in any direction you want. Right? You can make it parallel to this edge. It's like I got 68 degrees. You could do it the other way. It's basically, this is optional what I'm showing. You don't have to do it. The other one is 8 degrees. So let's say I want to roll with this one. I do 8 degrees. Now I have these fills as well. All I have to do is overlap them with the actual drawing. So what I do is bring them over. And you can use the keyboard to just like move them over your lines. And that's in the right space basically. So now I have added this fill to the walkable surfaces. I have one for the backgrounds. I have one for the ground. And I have my shadow. And I have my silhouettes as well. So that's it. Okay? This one is optional. I just wanted to show you light paint and a custom texture, how you can also use the fills to add custom texture. The second one is optional. Okay?